Resident Evil 7 turned 5 years old this year, and I've yet to play the game. It's crazy to think that a franchise I used to hold so close to me, I haven't touched either of the two newest main installments. Resident Evil 2 Remake was the last Resident Evil game I played from start to finish, and somehow, with those 5 years of Resident Evil 7 being out, I have yet to spoil the game for myself. The Resident Evil series journey starts in 1996, where the first Resident Evil came out on PlayStation 1. It very quickly reached mass success in the survival horror genre. I was actually not born yet, so the first Resident Evil game I got to experience was Resident Evil 2. Even though I did play it some, I was really way too young to actually try to figure out the game for myself, so my first playthrough was actually me watching my brother play through Resident Evil 2. But very quickly, either way, I fell in love with this franchise. Let's jump all the way to 2005, where I was just a little bit more coherent now. Resident Evil 4 would release for the GameCube and change the main gameplay of the Resident Evil franchise to its core, opting for a more action approach to the survival horror genre. I still remember the first time I played Resident Evil 4 actually. I was at a friend's house and he busted out his GameCube and showed me the village section of Resident Evil 4. Like a good friend, he told me to get the shotgun, which triggered the chainsaw enemy to come out and killed me in one swift hit. This death animation that was given to you in Resident Evil 4 when the chainsaw enemy got you still terrifies me to this day because of how much it caught me off guard as a kid. The game might have steered away from the same type of survival horror of the original games, but the horror element was definitely still there. This success would change the direction Resident Evil would go on from here on out, for better or for worse. The following mainline Resident Evil game, Resident Evil 5 if you could have guessed, also steered completely away from the survival horror aspects of the previous games. Listen, I'm not saying Resident Evil 5 was bad, but what I am saying is it had less tense situations and less of a survival horror feel, especially due to the game being co-op. While the entire fanbase was split on Resident Evil 5, Capcom really brought the entire fanbase together by releasing Resident Evil 6 and absolutely crushing everyone's hopes and dreams of the classic Resident Evil franchise survival horror feel. I think the main focus of the Resident Evil franchise at this point were its characters. Either way, this is about where I completely checked out of the Resident Evil franchise. It was very disheartening and upsetting, especially because I picked up the Resident Evil 6 Special Edition, which came with every prior mainline Resident Evil game in the franchise. I was just not enjoying the games anymore. Understanding the frustration with the fanbase, Capcom knew a change had to have been done. This takes us to 2017, where Resident Evil 7 releases and once again changes the core gameplay of the Resident Evil franchise. When Resident Evil 7 was announced, I was extremely excited, but for some odd reason just never got around to playing it. And after Resident Evil 8 released, I realized I've probably run out of time and need to jump on the boat of the mainline Resident Evil games before I get too far back. I purposely didn't spoil Resident Evil 7 for this many years because I knew I would get around to play it, and finally, I have. This is my experience with Resident Evil 7. 5 years later. Capcom, knowing that their game was going to reshape the Resident Evil franchise, decided to go with a first-person perspective. Now for me, I thought there was some obvious inspiration from the critically acclaimed demo of PT and also Outlast, or so I thought, with the game was actually in development before PT had released the demo. So it shows the development team already knew there was a change of direction that needed to be done. That was just the first thing that stuck out to me. Next was the location, feeling eerily similar to the original game, just sort of a house in the middle of nowhere, but taking its own inspiration with being from a southern location. Next was the main antagonist, which was just a single family. I'm not gonna lie, the first person's perspective made me a little uneasy about jumping this game right off the bat. The perspective change and just general uneasiness about playing a first person horror game for me, I was just really in my head about this one. This was a big leap for the Resident Evil franchise, and as excited I was also very worried that it wasn't going to be good. Even after reading reviews and hearing other people talk highly about the game, in my head I just had this mental block where it's like, you're not going to like this game, this franchise is still going to be dead to you, etc, etc. On top of that, I'm not gonna lie, I'm very reactionary to jump scares, and my main time being able to play this game is being at night, so I knew this was gonna be a little bit of a problem. Either way, I was extremely excited to finally get back on track and try another Resident Evil game. Resident Evil to me has always been known for a little bit of the over top on the story side and can be cheesy at times. And I was really interested to see how the story would play out. The story starts off with back-to-back video messages from the main character Ethan's wife, Mia. The first being short and sweet run-of-the-mill video message one might receive from a loved one they hadn't seen in a while. The next is a lot more alarming and what pushes us into the main story of Resident Evil 7. Mia alerts Ethan that the job she took wasn't exactly as she told him and not to try to come and find her. Oddly enough, 3 years later we get a message from Mia asking Ethan to come and find her. I know, what a twist. This already is a lot to unpack and leaves a lot up to the imagination of the player. Mia states that she lied to Ethan about the job and doesn't elaborate, leaving the player completely clueless on what she could mean by this. She said it was a babysitting job, and this second message kind of just comes out of nowhere. It's simple, but enough of a motivational push to be intrigued on what's going to happen next. We are now driving to the mansion as Ethan. The slow build and exploration of the house before anything actually happens was a really good introduction and a very good way to set the mood. The house looks and feels abandoned, and the last thing you expect is to actually be on the right track at this point. This is also our first introduction to the recordings or the VHS tapes. This is a great way to build tension without putting our main character in any real harm so far. You're living through and experiencing a truly horrifying experience as someone else. Now the VHS tapes actually don't play that big of a role in the game. I kind of wish they played a bigger game, but still they're really cool inclusion in the game. I really enjoyed playing through the VHS tapes and then replaying through that same section in real time as Ethan. After watching the VHS tape, you take the same path that the crew did and find Mia, actually this early on in the game. Obviously this wasn't the end of the game, but you do find Mia very early on, and I was really surprised by this. After immediately losing Mia again, which great, we already failed our objective, upon finding her again, she's a little bit different. Mia, in this weird state, attacks Ethan, and we end up having to put her down after she cuts off our hand with a chainsaw. And after that, we get to meet our first member of the family with this iconic line.
Welcome to the family, son.
Waking up, you're probably introduced to the most iconic scene in the whole game. The dinner scene offers a lot. You meet the entire Baker family for the first time, you see how they interact with each other, and you get an overwhelming sense that there's something going on with this family. After dinner, Ethan wiggles his way out, and we are now free to explore the main part of the house. Very quickly though, Jack finds us and we are now being chased by him once again. This takes us to our first safe room in the game, and this gives me a chance to talk about the safe room theme in this game. I don't know if it's because of how long I played the game or just by the tension that was built up before finding a safe room, but hearing the song in the safe room genuinely put me in a better mood. And I think that's exactly what was trying to be done with the safe room theme. It's supposed to make you feel relief, comfort, and just overall less tense. And that being said, it's not like a very cheery song, no, but the first initial string of the guitar is just so closely related to the feeling of safety and relief for me now. Undoubtedly, this is by far my favorite safe room theme out of any Resident Evil game. They absolutely nailed it with this one. Coming back to reality, we now leave the safe room and are able to explore the entire main part of the house. All the way up to this point, I feel like Resident Evil 7 has done a great job establishing the tone, the sense of urgency, and the absolute fear we are going to experience throughout this game. The layout of the house feels very reminiscent of older Resident Evil games. Some doors locked away behind strange images and weird puzzles to get us to the next part of the house. Generic joke where living in this house had to have been absolutely miserable before all this happened. Now we have a follower throughout this entire house, and that is Jack Baker. And unfortunately, our only real option at this point is just to run away from him. You can stun him from time to time, but basically this entire time he'll just be like 10 feet behind you. And hey, this is probably why the safe room theme works so well, is because the only time you are actually safe in this part of the game. The entire time you're running through this main house, there is no moment of comfort. There is no time to really relax, catch your breath, unless you make your way to a safe room. Either way, the first time we actually get to fight Jack one-on-one is in the garage. It's not a long fight, but it is a tense one, and I'll say the way it ends is truly something else. And around this time is where I sat through and played the second VHS tape. This time we play as Mia and what looks like to be a separate part of the house running away from the mother character. After exploring the main house for a bit, you will end up heading down to the basement. This will be your first time encountering a different creature type actually called the Molded. The Molded spawn from big black goops of mold that are sitting around the basement and are just big moldy creatures. They're a little bit bland for my tasting, and with that being said, they actually did scare me a few times, but it makes sense adding a different type of creature to fight alongside the Baker family. As just having to worry about Jack in this section, there still would have been more areas of dead time where you're just running around and not having to worry about much. And I will say the molded at least make things a little bit more exciting. After making your way through the entire basement, you're now encountered with this second battle with Jack, and this is actually at this point where you should get the last item, you should be able to leave the house. Cool fun side note, I did not have the shotgun for this encounter, and while I was watching some other gameplay footage on YouTube and this guy had the shotgun, I just thought you weren't even supposed to have it at this point. Really confusing for me. Whatever, I feel more accomplished now that I defeated Jack with a pistol and the knife. Now you're going to notice that the house still has some rooms that aren't even explored yet. Mainly the rooms with a snake symbol and a scorpion symbol. This is something I enjoyed, as even though I left the main house, I was still extremely excited to find these keys and make my way back to finish exploring the rest of the house. Leaving the house for the first time, I was again kind of taken back by what had happened. I know this game wasn't over, I know that it still had lots to offer, but maybe took me only about an hour and a half to get out of the house. But everything I had known about this game up to this point had only taken place in this house. So again, just a little bit caught off guard by that. Nothing bad, just surprising. You journey towards an old house, which is actually the VHS tape that we saw with Mia in it. Again, I already said how cool this is, but I'm gonna go ahead and reiterate this. I love this feature. I love playing this section in a previous time period and then coming back to it. Really cool. Love it. But this brings me to one of my few complaints about the game, the bugs. I don't know if it was just fighting them wrong, but for some reason whenever I used my burner on them, it wouldn't kill them right away. It took a lot longer and I always seemed to take damage by them. It just seemed like it took a lot of ammo and utility to kill a very small group of an enemy. It just didn't seem worth it and very annoying in the moment. This leads us to our next follower, which would be Marguerite, who is able to spawn these bugs. Even though her and Jack were obviously trying to accomplish the same goal of killing Ethan, their different personalities really shine with the way they look for you. Jack was more of like a brute, a tank-like creature using his brute force against Ethan, while Marguerite used her bugs almost like they were her children. She's a lot more tired sounding, a lot more just sounding like an exhausted mother being frustrated with her children, the way she acts and yells out for you. Now, right before Marguerite's first boss battle, there's an absolutely terrifying jump scare. This was one of the few times in the game where I actually had to pause the game and take a second to recollect myself. Again, I know jump scares are normally cheap, but this one specifically was done well because if you had been paying attention, the same sequence happened in the VHS tape. So if you have some 4D chess brain, you could have actually seen this one coming. After defeating Marguerite for the first time in sort of a lackluster first boss battle, she escapes through a tunnel to a different part of the house. I think this adaptation of Marguerite was peak horror in Resident Evil 7. The actual fight was well done, it was in an open area, and the only thing that really held it back for me was the bug spawning once again. But other than that, it was a pretty hard battle and she put up a good fight. Thankfully, this area has plenty of items to heal yourself with and ammo to grab while you're fighting, but be careful because obviously when you're in your inventory, the game doesn't pause. And one time as I frantically tried to craft a med kit, I got my ass beaten. And this actually plays very favorably towards Resident Evil 7. I was so stressed out by my low health and so distraught in the moment trying to fight off Marguerite that even though I knew it wasn't smart to try to build a first aid kit in that moment, I still tried because I wasn't thinking straight. This level of tense, unreasonable thinking isn't normal for me, so hats off to this battle. After the fight, you're now able to enter the kids room area. Resident Evil 7 does a great job of keeping you on your toes as there was no real time to calm down. Entering the kids room, you're put right back on the edge as all the lights are off and there's black mold everywhere, almost guaranteeing another fight with the molded. After grabbing the first part of the items that we need for the serum, this is our first glimpse at a child character named Evelyn. This brings us to our last Baker, Lucas Baker, the one who was throwing food at us at the very beginning. After exploring his room, you can see that he is equally smart as psychotic. I don't know if this was done on purpose, but all of the trophies I remember seeing in his room were all second place trophies or honorable mentions. I don't know if this is like hinting at something, but it's something I noticed while I was looking at everything. This is also the last VHS tape that we will get in this area of the game. Lo and behold, this is also probably one of my favorite VHS tapes out of the three. You play as a character going through some sort of game show put up by Lucas Baker. We have to just kind of figure out these puzzles and little trivia things. And I hate to admit it, this is the first time I actually did need help in this game as I couldn't figure out how to clean this sight glass off. But completing this part is pretty necessary for the future run with Ethan, and you'll see why. Running through this booby-trapped area, this all sort of culminates into a fight with a special molded that we haven't seen before. He's a little bit bigger and can vomit on you, but I think the biggest takeaway from this section is the absolute insane loud music that's playing as Lucas is berating you to try to fight this molded, sort of bringing a whole nother level of tension to this fight, as already we're kind of worried about seeing a new creature we haven't fought. After defeating the molded, we are now put in the same area that we played in the VHS tape, except this time we know the passcode for the back room area, so you don't need to get the key to release the fuel that would explode, putting our previous character who played this in a fiery pit that led to his demise. This is a perfect way to do sort of foreshadowing because it's not that long ago and you still remember what happened the first time you play it. I'm just going to say it one last time, the VHS tapes were a lot of fun to play through and probably one of my favorite parts of this game. Just love them. After this, you pretty much immediately meet up with Mia and Zoe. You make 2 doses of the serum and then get into a surprise another interaction with Jack Baker. I liked the idea of having to go up and down the floors to get to his weak points, although it seemed like if I was on the ladder, he never was able to hit me. That being said, I had to do this fight 2 different times, so I guess, hey, either way, it was a little tough. This also just screams over the top Resident Evil style stuff, so I really did enjoy it for that aspect too. Towards the end of the fight, you are forced to inject him with one of the serums, as told by from Zoe, to actually defeat him, which for some reason surprises Zoe when you go back to Mia and Zoe with only 1 serum. And now you are forced to choose to give your one last serum to either Mia or Zoe. There are issues with this choice at this moment. We'll come back to it, but just know I didn't really like it to begin with. But on our way out with Mia, we feel happy, we think we did it. Our boat gets taken out by sort of like a black molded creature. This next section we actually play through the eyes of Mia, and we start to get these answers of what actually happened 3 years ago with Mia. We come face to face with Evelyn, and this leads us to our last VHS tape that we actually get to play in the game. I enjoyed this part because it made Mia more than just someone who needed help and actually could have taken care of herself if she hadn't been taken over by Evelyn. Here we finally get shown that Mia was lying 3 years ago about what she was actually doing. Well, I mean, I guess technically she was babysitting, but it's a much more complicated situation. Obviously, I don't think Ethan would have understood it if she tried to elaborate, so keeping it as a simple babysitting job in quotation marks, I get it. Talking about this flashback VHS sequence, the molded in this area are just annoying. Everything's well lit, so they're not really scary, just more or less in your way. This takes us to our last part of the game, which is in the same exact ship that we just played through, but in present day. This whole part is pretty forgettable. I didn't like it a lot myself. Again, we're just fighting the same molded creatures we have been fighting throughout the game. The area is a little bit annoying to traverse as you have to take specific paths through either elevator shaft or blocked staircases, so it's never easy to get anywhere. After this short and kind of annoying section, we finally get to play as Ethan again, and once we get a small cutscene with Jack Baker.
Ethan? Ethan? Hey, shh, I know. I'm not gonna hurt you. Hell, I never would have if I could have helped you.
What do you mean?
I'm no killer, son. Neither is Marguerite, nor my boy Lucas, or even Zoe here. That girl, Evelyn, she did this.
What the hell is she? No, what did she do to you?
She infected us with her gift. That's what she calls it. I found her near a busted out tank in the bayou. Everything changed after that.
So she infects you and then she takes control?
No. Not exactly, son. She just... She forces her way into your mind, your soul. You can't fight back. You are connected to her, and you can't resist the urge to... Oh, you're a different person after that.
Just like Mia. So Mia sent me that message because of Evelyn.
Listen, the girl just wants a family of her own. She's the key, all right? You find her, and you stop her. Ethan, free my family. Please.
This scene kind of comes out of nowhere, and it's a little bit confusing on where we're seeing all this, but either way, the actual scene is really well done. The actor who played Jack Baker killed it here. Really sort of brings it together as his character. No longer mad at him, just mad at the circumstances that he's been put in. It really kind of took away all the anger I had for him and his family and just sort of made me sad for him. After leaving the ship with Ethan, we are now in this salt mine area. If we thought the ship area was pretty boring, well, this is a whole nother level. Very forgettable, you're never in low ammo situations, so it's very easy to get through it. And other than a single room with a bunch of info dump, this whole area felt like it could have been skipped without missing much. At this point, you return to the house for the finale. You get some hallucinations and replay the very first time you met Mia and had to fight her. It was nice for this all to play out and really show that it wasn't Mia controlling herself in this situation. This leads us to our most out of nowhere boss final I think I've ever had. Injecting Evelyn with the serum, you actually find out that it was Grandma Baker, or she disguised herself as Grandma Baker to play her part in the family. It makes sense now why she's randomly thrown into certain sections and random rooms throughout the game, very ominously watching you as you take down her wannabe family. And every time I saw her whenever I was playing the game, I was waiting for a jump scare, but the fact that she never did anything made it more terrifying for me. Her presence just unsettled me, and it was executed perfectly. This is the unexpected, really out of nowhere turn. After injecting her with the serum, like I said, she turns into Grandma Baker and then turns into this giant molded monster. Thankfully, this section ends pretty quick and we get some help from a familiar looking company that is the Umbrella Corporation, with none other than Chris Redfield actually helping us up. Mia and Ethan are helicoptered away. Roll credits. And before we go into my overall review and thoughts about the game, let's talk about the other choice that you were given. So basically the only way I could see you not choosing Mia is if you were so distraught from her at the very beginning when she cut off your hand. This is before knowing entirely what's going on. I guess there's some sort of angle where Zoe's helped you the entire time and hasn't done anything to wrong you. But at the same time, this entire game and experience was based around finding Mia. So personally for me, it felt like a very clear-sided, one-sided choice. I don't know how many people pick Zoe, I don't know what the statistics are like, but genuinely I would feel and assume that Mia was the overwhelming majority pick. I remember at the end of the game it said I got the good ending, so I was really excited to look back and see what changes the endings, what other endings there were. I raced to YouTube when I was done and looked up the alternate ending, where picking Zoe not only got Zoe killed still, but Mia as well. I completely understand throwing choices in a game. I don't even think it was done terribly bad, but you at least had one character who has done no wrong to you than a character who pushes the entire narrative of the game, of course, but has changed and you're not sure exactly what's going on and why she's attacking you. Alright, that was the story section of the game. Now let's see if Resident Evil 7 saved the Resident Evil franchise. Resident Evil 6 actually wasn't a flop on the side of making money, selling 7.7 million copies, just more so on how audience reacted to it. Genuinely, I think if they had made Resident Evil 7 almost exactly like how they made Resident Evil 6, or continued down this more action-based gameplay, I think the numbers would have continued to dip. On the other hand, Resident Evil 7 actually outsold Resident Evil 6, looking at 10 million copies sold, and the average review for it being around a 9 or 10, while Resident Evil 6 wasn't failure by any stretch of the imagination, but reviews averaged around 6 to 7. Okay, now it's all done, let's talk about the game and how I enjoyed it. Resident Evil 7 to me was a really personal experience. It really reminded me of playing one of the classic Resident Evil games that I remember enjoying so much growing up. It made me feel every emotion I think they were intending me to feel while I was playing this game. The levels of dread this game gave me actually at one point just put me in such a shock that I had to take like a 10-minute break from the game. From start to finish, this game pretty much 100% pulled me in. I genuinely don't know why I pushed off this game for so long, because I really enjoyed it myself. It felt like getting back together with an old friend. Way back when, we had some really fun times. Maybe we were on our separate ways for college or had a small falling out, but this felt like that friend coming back to town, almost like we completely forgot or moved on from any issues we had, just to relive some of the good times. The characters were likable, and even though they played the spooky child aspect, I don't mind because it was done pretty well. The child was an experiment and just wanted a normal family. I was not an experiment growing up, but I can definitely understand the want from a kid to just want to have a normal family. From the characters to the safe rooms, again, I know I talked about it, but the music was just so damn good. It created such a good atmosphere. Even though the molded kind of felt like placeholders for this much better put together Baker family, I didn't mind it because it's something that you need. Sometimes you need placeholders or something to mix it up. At the end of the day, I still think it's a much better step up from just a generic zombie creature. It would have been almost impossible to include a very lore-friendly new experience and still offer something that's new and refreshing. The direction they took was a fantastic idea. Adding this new character, Ethan, who's a completely new character to the Resident Evil franchise, and then at the very end, tying in a familiar face was a really good way to do it. And then somehow making Jack Baker likable to any degree, which is completely crazy to think about because of how much anger you felt for him throughout the entire game. Even if it is just a small thrown in cutscene at the very end, it was really well done by the actor and you can actually just hear the pain in his voice. Again, I don't think the choice was really well done and I even thought of a few ways that it could be better. First step is just remove Zoe completely and have Mia guide you through the story in her moments of clarity, or keep Zoe in the game and just not show up at the very end because she understands that Mia is the whole reason why you're here and she's just unfortunately trapped with this family. Another thing I did see some people complain about was the playtime. For me, the game took about 6 hours and 55 minutes to play, so, you know, round that up to 7 hours. I thought it was the perfect amount of time. You could already tell the ships and the mines sort of felt hammed in and a little bit like filler. And I really couldn't imagine more of those areas if you try to stretch out the game. Like, if you want this to be like a 12 to 15 hour game long, just imagine more areas like the mines and the ship. And then all of a sudden that 7 hour playtime doesn't sound so bad. Now, this is where I would have talked about the DLCs if I had any access to them or if they just worked on my computer, but neither of them did for some reason, so I don't know. They seem to both play into aspects of the games I wouldn't have enjoyed either way, one being more stealth and melee oriented, and one where you play as Chris Redfield clearing out the mines again. With that being said, it feels like Resident Evil relit the fuse of my love for this franchise. I'm really excited for the next installment, and hey, maybe I won't wait 5 years to play it. I know this game came out 5 years ago, and your reviews of this game are probably very cemented on what you've already felt, but either way, I do want to hear what you guys thought about Resident Evil 7, as it was this very, you know, gear shifting sort of situation that they did. The reason why I think this franchise has been able to exist for so long is their ability to switch genres and still put out a solid game, and also of course because of the dedication of the fans. The fact that Resident Evil 6 wasn't review bombed to hell really shows that you can put Leon, Chris Redfield in almost anything and still get love for it because of the fans. Unless it's Operation Raccoon City, which I do want to talk about at some point. Either way, that's going to do it for me. I hope you guys really enjoyed the video. It's probably the largest project I've worked on, and I thought it was going to be done before the 5-year anniversary, but it's not going to get done before then. Thanks for watching. If you want more Resident Evil content, let me know. If you like survival games or survival horror games, go ahead and subscribe. Those are the main games I cover, and I want to cover from here on out. So if you want any like good hidden gem survival horror games, let me know, and I'd love to cover them. But either way, thank you guys for watching the video, and I'll see you next time.